More than likely you can hear that wind blowing. We have a storm coming in, and before it gets here, I've got to get this RV winterized because it's going to get down to 27 degrees, which is very cold for us here in the south. But I'm going to show you how I winterize this RV. But first off, I need to let you know every RV is different. Every one of them has a different setup. So this particular application I'm going to show you might not work for you, and what I do suggest is watching several videos from different people to kind of get an idea as to what may work best for your certain situation. Because if your setup is not exactly like mine, I'm not talking about the size of the trailer. What I'm talking about is the way the water system is done. So anyway, let's get started with it, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm getting the RV away from where I eventually want to park it. Because what I'm going to have to do is open the holding tank and let the water out of it. And also I have what's called low point drain. So when I get to the low point drain and also the holding tank and empty those out, I'm going to have water everywhere. But I'm also going to have to be walking around this RV quite a bit to winterize it. So I'm going to empty this water out in this spot, and then I'm going to move the RV to where I want to finish it out at. So this way I don't have to waller around in mud and water for the next 30 minutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is undo this right here, which is for the holding tank. And this holds all my fresh water whenever I'm boondocking or out camping. So once I get this off, then the water will come out of the tank and drain all over the ground here. And it's going to make quite a bit of mess, so that's why I say it's best to do this in one place and kind of finish it out in another area. So now I'll go to the back part of the RV where it says low point drain. And it's got one for the hot and the cold. So let me go ahead and get those off and we'll get to the next step. Okay, like most of you, this is a water heater cover. Take this cover down, and if you notice there's a plug right here. So what you've got to do is you've got to take that plug out to get the 6 gallons of water out of your water heater. And this is very important, but also remember that when you get ready to come back in the spring, that you need to make sure you get this completely filled before you turn the water heater on. Now, let me also show you this, that once you get this plug opened, this is what's called, some people call it a pop-off valve, some call it a pressure relief valve. Once you open this valve here, it will barely trickle. You take this little lever right here and you put it in the open position, and it will allow that water to flow out of there much quicker. Well, we got all of the water heater drained out. We're still waiting on the holding tank to get completed. And the low point drain, both of those are done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the black and gray tank. I've already removed the cap. So I'm going to open those valves up for the black and gray tank, just like I was going to dump it out. There shouldn't be anything in there because I dumped it right before I left my last camp spot. So I'm going to take this water hose and I'm going to go inside and I'm going to shoot the water straight down the toilet, and I'm also going to shoot it down the shower. So that should flush out all the water inside here. And then once I get all of it flushed out that I can possibly get flushed out, then I will go ahead and pour some of the antifreeze down in there in the deodorizer. Because you can imagine how bad that would smell if that unsanitized water sat in those tanks for 4 to 6 months. Well, I drove the RV around the neighborhood and left all the valves open and all the drain plugs out. That way any residual water could fall out of it while I'm going around the block. So what I did is I went around curves, went up and down hills and everything I could to make sure I got all the residual water out of it. Now, as I said, I am winterizing it, which basically this RV may sit here for several months. With that being said, I'm going to take some red cedar and put these small boards under the tires. The reason I do that is cedar does not absorb moisture quite as bad as other woods do. So the good of that is it keeps your tires from holding moisture and rotting and all that. So it's kind of an extra protection measure for your tires. So not only am I winterizing the holding tanks, but I'm getting this RV ready to sit for a few months. And since we live in a wooded area, I tried to park it to where I didn't have as many trees over it, and definitely wanted to make sure I didn't have any broken tree limbs over the RV. It's usually when they fall is in the winter time because of all the water that we get in the winter from rain and snow and all that. So try to make sure to look above your RV before you park it for good for the winter. I'm just kidding with you, I didn't say anything. This next step is going to be too loud with this air compressor running. So I'm just going to have to tell you what I'm about to do instead of show you. So here we go. On the side of the RV, you will see that it says City Water Connection. I have installed this little adapter so that I can blow my air hose through this adapter. And you can get these, even Walmart carries these, and just about any store that carries, you know, RV supplies. So anyway, all you do is thread that into the City Water Connection, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, on my air compressor, I actually have a tank PSI, which that's how much air is in the tank, and I also have a regulated PSI, and that is how much air pressure is going to come out of this hose. You want this between 15 and 20 PSI. If you get it too high, you can actually have a problem with your water lines as you're trying to blow them out. You can actually have a blowout, as in bust the water line, so you don't want to do that. So now what I'm going to do is take this air hose and I am going to put it up to this fitting that I showed you just a moment ago, and I am going to do it just like I was trying to air up a tire. So you just push on this and water will start blowing out of your low point drain. So what you do is you just keep blowing water out of the low point drain, and periodically what I like to do is I like to put the plugs back in place on those drains so that it builds up pressure, and then blow it out again. Then what I'll do is I will get Purdy to go inside the RV with all of the plugs installed outside and let it build up pressure on the pipes inside. While Purdy is inside, I will get her to take the water faucets and just open them up for a second or two, close them, you know, and let it build up pressure and let it pour out the water. I keep doing this. It's just like brushing your teeth or anything else, rinse and repeat. Just keep rinse, repeat until you finally get to the point that you're not getting any more water out of the system. You want to completely blow all that water out of it. As I said, I will be out here pushing the air through while she's inside opening and closing the valves. What I like to do is start with the faucet nearest where I'm entering the air at. That way the air pressure is the strongest at that point, and I want to flush the line down the RV as I go. So basically what I'm doing is, as I enter the air right here, she is right here at the kitchen sink emptying that water line out. And as soon as she feels like she's got everything out of there, then she goes into the bathroom and starts with the shower doing the opening and closing of the valves. And what we basically try to do is one at a time. We'll do the cold and then the hot. But also, here's a good tip for you. When you do the toilet, put the lid down because there is air pressure. So if you have that lid up and you flush that toilet, you're going to have all that air pressure blowing all that water out of the toilet onto you. So make sure you have that toilet lid closed when you push the toilet flush. Okay, now that we feel confident that we got all of the water out of the lines, what I like to do is I take the antifreeze and I pour it into the holding tank. And then I go inside and I turn the water pump on as if I was boondocking somewhere. My hopes are is that if there's any water trapped in that water pump, that I'm gonna be pumping that antifreeze through it and help protect that. The other thing you want to do is your shower inside, you've got a line that goes to the shower head. It goes from the faucet all the way up to the shower head. I like to unattach that at the faucet side. So I do that so that there's no water trapped in that line and cause that to bust. Also, when you feel like you are completely done, you've got all the water and air out of the lines, I turn all of the valves on full blast and leave them wide open all winter long. If there is any water still left in that line, it will be able to expand. The reason water lines bust in the first place is if water freezes, it expands and there's nowhere for the water to go. So what happens is when the water expands, it actually will bust your pipe. So if you leave the water valves wide open, the water can expand and it can actually go throughout the pipe as opposed to just staying stuck in one position. So that pretty much concludes all of the water, but I still got a little bit more winterizing to do outside of just the water. Okay, so now that I got all the water out, I still have to deal with the battery. I do not want to leave that battery out here in the cold weather all winter long. It's not going to do it any good. It's not going to serve any purpose to be out here. And cold weather and hot weather are real bad on batteries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the battery and I'm going to bring it into my garage and I'm going to wrap it up in some old blankets and quilts that I don't really need anyway. But that way it'll help keep that battery protected from getting too cold this winter. So hopefully next spring when I put it back in, it will be ready for me. But I also want it to be fully charged before I store it. You never want to store a battery for 5-6 months low on charge. So make sure your battery's charged up real good before you store it for the winter. As I said earlier, you might want to make sure that you get a little bit of water down into the drain. But while you're doing that, you might want to look under the kitchen sink and make sure you didn't leave a gallon of fresh water or some water bottles that are full, because once it gets cold, those are going to bust and make a real bad mess all over your RV. And by no means, don't forget that refrigerator. You've got to open the door to the refrigerator, put you some baking soda in there. You can imagine how bad that thing would stink if you left it closed for 5 months. So just as one final checklist, you've got all the water blown out of the lines. You also take about maybe a half a cup and pour it into each drain. Like in the kitchen sink, you're going to pour about a half a cup in the drain. In the shower, pour about a half a cup, and also in the toilet. But don't push the foot pedal, just let it sit up on the top. And so that should take care of all of your water line system. Also your battery, you want to make sure your battery's in storage over the winter. And also you want to put some cedar lumber up under the tires. You could also use pressure treated wood or any other kind of wood, but you want to get it up off of the ground so that it's not constantly sitting on moist, wet, cold soil for the next 5 to 6 months. Folks, I believe that about does it for us on this edition of Dave's RV channel and Dave and Purdy's channel. I will put this video on both channels, so thanks for watching, folks. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.